There are some maps that show you the world in a way that you've never seen it before. And with the help of this map, you can understand the world a little bit better. This is fertility rates in the 1970s. In the Middle East, it's very similar. It's about 6 to 8 kids. There's only one country on this map that's purple, and that's Kenya. So it means at this time in Kenya, in each household, there was more than 8 babies in one family. And as you can see, the northern countries and the western countries like Europe and the US are all blue. And the Scandinavian countries are dark blue, which means less than 2 children in these countries. This was in the 1970s. But let's see what it looks like today. We're gonna go forward 52 years, meaning 2022. Unfortunately, most of the world is blue now, and that means less than 2 children per household. And the only place that has a lot of children being born is the continent of Africa. In the continent of Asia, Afghanistan has the highest fertility rate, meaning 5 to 6 children per household. As you know, the Europeans loved their potatoes, and this is the map. The numbers you're seeing basically go up and down, and the darker the map, the more potatoes they consume per year. Like you see Ukraine and Belarus, they are the darkest ones, so they consume the highest amount of potatoes. Belarus, it says 170, and that means each person per year consumes 170 kilograms of potatoes. That's half a kilo per day per person. In the European countries, Cyprus has the lowest potato consumption rate. This is the imprisonment rate worldwide. The way it's calculated is that per 100,000 people, how many of them are in prison? Of course, the US is the highest one. The reason is the population is very high. Most states don't have execution, and if they want to be executed, they have to be in prison for a very long time before their execution date arrives. After US, Turkmenistan is number 2. For every 100,000 person, there's 552 people in prison. Some people call this country the North Korea number 2, and it's extremely strict on its population. There's a chance for the littlest offense, you can go to prison. India has a good situation going. For every 100,000 people, there's only 35 people in jail. In the Middle East, you can see as well, they're very similar, most of them. And in Europe, the most amount of prisoners per capita is in Belarus. Belarus has been mentioned 2 times in this video already. It's good to know that in prison, they also serve potatoes. From 2013 to now, more than 150 countries have agreed that they want to be part of the One Belt, One Road China design. And that means all these countries are going to be connected via road. All the red you're seeing is connected to everything, and the yellow ones are considering joining this network. Everybody knows this map. This is Egypt, a country that has 110 million people. The color you're seeing is the population density of Egypt. The deeper the red, and when it turns into purple and pink, the population density is greater. You can notice that most of this country is a desert. A lot of people live around the Nile River. Most people live close to the capital, especially the Mediterranean area, and a little bit live on the Red Sea side. This is the European map for the largest trading partner, and the flag you're seeing is the largest trade partner for that country. Like for example, France's biggest trading partner is Germany, but that's like almost the entire continent because all you're seeing is Germany flag. The most amount of import Germany gets is from the Netherlands, which is surprising. The UK is the only country in Europe whose biggest partner is the US. Russia brings everything from China, and Turkey brings everything from Russia. There is a reason that Germany's economy is extremely strong and it's in 4th place. If you divide the world in 4 sections like this, most of the people, meaning 73% of the world, live on the northeast, 13% live in the northwest, 9% in the southeast, and 5% in the southwest, which is basically South America. This is the map of the big 5 religions. Pink is Christianity, green is Islam, orange is Hinduism, yellow is Buddhism, and blue is Judaism, which is only Israel on this map. This is the obesity rate of Asia. And when we say obesity, we're not talking about fat. We're talking about obesity like this. The highest rate in the world is actually Kuwait right here, 37.9%. And the rest of the Middle East, except Yemen, suffers from the same thing. Like Afghanistan is good, they're about 5.5%. The lowest obesity rate in the world, and Asia for that matter, is Vietnam at 2.1% obesity rate. If you eat less carbohydrates, it will help you lose some weight. A bad diet that makes you gain weight is usually sugar and carbohydrates. Everybody probably has heard about the keto diet, but it actually does work when you eat less carbs and sugar and eat more eggs, meat, and vegetables. So if you can, try to eat less carbohydrates like rice, bread, macaroni, spaghetti, all those stuff, because it's not good for you. And of course, don't eat a lot of sugar. This is the number of venomous animals by country. Of course, the highest one is Australia, but when you look at it, next to the equator is a higher chance of having it. But whenever you go in Central Asia and Europe, you're doing pretty well. But it's funny because France is the only country in Europe that is red, and I'm not sure why. This is the map of will you receive food as a guest at someone else's house? The Mediterranean section is great because the weather is nice and everybody's in a good mood. But the more you move up north and the colder it gets, the colder the people get, and they're not as friendly as you think. It's funny when you look at the United Kingdom, because Scotland and Ireland are probably the friendliest people there. So if you go up north, not only will they not feed you, you have to feed them. This is the map of the countries that do not use the metric system, so they use the Imperial system. Of course, the US, everybody knows, Liberia, and Myanmar. This is the map of the countries that Britain did not invade. In Asia, you got Mongolia, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and in Europe you got Belarus and Sweden, and a few small countries. In Africa you got Chad, Central African Republic, Republic of the Congo, Ivory Coast, and Mali. And South America suffered a lot. Only Bolivia and Paraguay did not get invaded by Britain. In this map, we could see the alcoholic consumption rate of the entire world. Of course, the Islamic countries don't have data or they don't consume it whatsoever, so it's all gonna be very low. In Europe, it has the highest rate of using it, especially Germany and the Balkans. In England, of course, the Irish and the Scottish drink more than the English. And some may wonder, why is Russia not the deepest red? That's because Russia is not a small country. This is a river, the Mississippi River to be exact, the 4th largest river, or should I say, longest flowing river in the world. This is basically what makes the US's land so valuable, because it reaches water to all these farmlands, and without it, most of US land would be useless, kind of like the Sahara Desert. This giant river flows from north all the way to south, and it has a length of 6,275 kilometers. These are the countries that use the most amount of coffee. Of course, the Scandinavian countries use the most, and Europeans and Western countries drink a lot of it. In Asia, not a lot of countries drink coffee except Russia, Korea, and Saudi Arabia and Oman. This map is the distribution of lions in history. But what you're seeing in red is the history and not now, because most of the lions have been extinct, and where they live now is in the blue sections. They're all located in Africa from central all the way to south, and there's a tiny dot in India where you can still find Asiatic lions. This is the map of the hazardous waste of the world. Of course, Russia has the most amount of it, Uzbekistan because it was part of the USSR, and the US is right there behind them. Do you see this map? This circle separates the entire world from it. More people live in this circle than outside of it. If you pay attention, you have China in this circle, India and Pakistan, Japan, both Koreas, Indonesia, the Philippines, and other Southeastern Asian countries. If you put a wall around this circle and separate it from the rest of the world, there will be more people inside the wall than outside of it. If you want to estimate how many people live in this circle, it's more than 4 billion people, or 53% of the world. You see this map is Australia and India. Even though Australia is much bigger than India, it only has 25 million people, and most of them live in the white section. And if you count it, only 2% of Australia's land is occupied by people. All of them are near the coast, especially the east coast of the island. But India, you can find people in every square inch, and recently it surpassed China and is the most populated country in the entire world. Let's look at an ancient map. You probably already know this, but back in the day, there was no satellites where you can get exact imagery on what the world looks like. It was all guessing and estimating. Like for example, in the year 1154, this is the map of the world. This is the Caspian Sea, and look how it's drawn. And you can see the Persian Gulf. Italy kind of resembles a boot, but not really. As you know, Southeast Asia, there's a lot of islands, but in this map, they just randomly drew a bunch of circles to resemble the islands. They also forgot one of the most important subcontinents in the world, India. This is the map of the certain plug different countries use. Most of the world uses the type CE or F, which is this one. The orange countries like North America and some parts of Latin America, including Saudi Arabia and Japan, use the type A or B, which is this one. Turkmenistan is always different from the world because they're the only country that uses the type L plug. India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan and some other countries have similar plugs to the entire world. China also has the English type plug, the type G. In this map, you could see the army outfit in different countries. This is the map of metal bands in the world. And as you can see, Scandinavian countries blow everyone out of the park. European countries love metal bands, but Western Russia loves metal bands. But in the map, you really don't see it, because in the country of Russia, there is a lot of different cultures throughout. It's good to know that when the USSR collapsed in the year 1991, Metallica decided to go to Moscow to have a concert for the very first time. And this is the biggest concert in history. Metallica is the most famous metal band in the world. More than 2 million people participated in this concert. More than 30 years has passed, but nobody has even gotten close to beating this record. Every time you look at the map of the world, you see the map of Africa in the middle. But it doesn't look that big. It's ginormous, but it doesn't really show its true size. Africa is a giant continent. Let's see which countries we can fit inside. China, India, and Japan. Eastern Europe and the entire country of the US. Some countries of Western Europe and Mexico. You could also fit the United Kingdom in Madagascar. The size of Africa is more than 30 million square kilometers. And look at Greenland up there. It looks giant next to Africa and they look similar. But don't believe this map. The map of Africa is real and Greenland is stretched because it's way up north and the map is flat. The true size of Greenland is about 800,000 square miles. So it's similar in size to Saudi Arabia. But in the world map, it looks double the size of Australia. And if you want to see why the map stretches out near the poles, watch this video we made. This is the map of cigarette consumption per capita in a year. And the darker it is, the more cigarette consumption there is. Russia and some Balkan countries smoke the most in the world, and they have created what you call a chimney. So in these countries, more than 3,000 cigarettes are smoked per person in a year. The red countries like China, Turkey, and other countries is 1,800 to 2,100 cigarettes per year. The light red ones like Iran, Iraq, and Saudi, and Northern Africa is between 900 to 1,200 cigarettes per year. And light countries like Afghanistan and India and most of Africa is less than 300 cigarettes per year. You have to know that execution is pretty much gone in Europe. And the last execution that happened was in 2017 in the country of Belarus. And the way the execution happened was with a firing squad, so they got shot. The first country to outlaw execution in Europe was the country of Iceland, which was in 1830. And their method of execution was with the form of beheading, not guillotine. Beheading with a sword. The last time the guillotine was used in Europe was in the year 1977 in the country of France itself. This is the map of gold in the world. The deeper the yellow, the more gold the country has. The most amount of gold is in the US government's hand, and that's more than 8,133 tons. The interesting part is that if you look at India's map, it says only 1.70% of the gold is in India's hands. But this is the amount of gold in the government's hand. Experts believe the most amount of gold is in Indian women's hands. They love gold, and whatever money they have, they purchase gold with it. If you calculate the gold in Indian households, you will find more than 27,000 tons of gold. And that's 3 times the amount of gold the US government has. This is the map of crude oil reserves based on the size. The bigger the country, the more oil it has. So don't ask why Iraq and Kuwait are so damn big. Look at Venezuela. The most amount of crude oil is in this country. After it's Saudi, then Canada, Iran, Iraq, and then Kuwait. This is the map of natural gas in the world. The most amount of natural gas is in the hands of Russia. The second most is in Iran's hand. And in third place, we have Qatar. The other countries in the Persian Gulf only have oil and barely have any natural gas. And after Qatar, you have Canada and the United States, and they have plenty of natural gas as well. But it costs a lot of money to pull out the natural gas like it does in the Persian Gulf. So Iran and Qatar have the most accessible natural gas in the world, and with the cheapest amount of money, they can pull the most amount of natural gas. This is the map of English speakers in Europe. If a Hungarian wants to speak with an Italian, they can't speak their home language, so they have to have a common language like English. And that is why if you want to work or go around traveling in Europe, you have to know English to communicate. The Netherlands knows the most amount of English as their second language. More than 90% of people speak English. And you guys see the percentages. Denmark and Sweden know a lot too, 86%. Only 20% of Hungarians know English, and this is the lowest in all of Europe. This is the maximum speed in the freeways of different countries. Like for example, look at Greenland, it's red. So that means the maximum speed you can drive is 50 miles an hour. In Canada and the US, each state has its own law. Like Texas has the highest speed limit at 85 miles an hour. You can find this speed in Iraq, Saudi, and Emirates because there is a lot of flat lands for you to drive quick. In Germany, some autobahns don't have a speed limit, and that is why it's pink. But this is only some autobahns. A lot of freeways there is speed limit. Most of the world is blue, so their maximum speed is going to be 75 miles an hour. Afghanistan, like yellow countries, have a maximum speed of 60 miles an hour. The lowest speed limit is dedicated to South Sudan and some other smaller countries, and you can speed only up to 45 miles an hour. This is the map of landlocked countries in the world. About 38 million people in the world have HIV, and if you want to separate them in the world, this is how they're divided. Most of them are in Central and South Africa. In second place, we have orange countries. West Africa is third place. Western countries, meaning the yellow ones, is fourth place. Latin America is fifth. Russia and Eastern Europe is sixth. And Middle East and North Africa is last place. This is the map of pollution in the world, and China is champion. India and Pakistan are in second place, and most countries are in red, which they create a lot of pollution. And the orange ones are right behind the red countries. The yellow countries create the least amount of pollution, but it has a lot to do with the population. Like if you look at Australia, it's yellow, and the main reason is that it has a very low population in a huge piece of land. This is the map of guns per 100 people, and the US can't get any darker because there's more than 100 guns per person. And the exact thing is, per 100 person, there is 120.5 guns. In Scandinavia, the country of Finland, per 100 person, there's 50 to 75 guns. In the Middle East, Yemen is in first place, and there is 100 weapons per 100 person. In Latin America, Uruguay has the #1 weapon. Per 100 person, there's 75 guns. And you could see countries right here. The lighter they get, the least amount of guns. And when you reach turquoise color like China, there is less than 5 guns per 100 person. This map shows corruption in the government of these countries, and the darker the color gets, the more corruption there is. Somalia and other African nations are one of the most corrupt countries in the world, and you have Turkmenistan and Afghanistan right there with it. In Iran and Iraq and other countries that are red, there is a lot of corruption as well. This is the total water withdrawal per capita, and the red colors use the most amount of water, like West Asia and Central Asia, America and Canada and Australia. The least amount of water usage is the blue countries, like Central Africa. But I have to tell you that these countries, a lot of them do not have running water. This is the map of the most photographed places in the world. And as you can see, Western Europe is the most amount of photographs taken. On this map, the blue countries drive on the left side of the road, and of course the red ones drive on the right side. This is the map of how many vehicles per 1,000 people there is in each country. In the US, it's the only country that is black, and that means there are over 750 vehicles per 1,000 person. And that is why in the US, cars are more affordable than anywhere in the world. Most of the world is red color, and that means there is less than 151 cars per 1,000 person. So cars aren't that common in the whole world. This map shows the amount of dogs per 1,000 person in each country. And of course, the darker it gets, the more dogs there is. In the US, there's plenty of dogs, but all of them are taken care of, and that is why you barely see stray dogs in the US. And that means anyone that has a dog should take care of it technically. But then you have Brazil, where there's a lot of dogs, but not a lot of dog owners, because there's a lot of stray dogs. And unfortunately, most dogs in the world are stray dogs. This is the map for average male body hair distribution. As you could clearly see, it shows how much body hair males have throughout the world. And when you look at around the Mediterranean and West Asia, that's where you find the most amount of hair. And then the least amount of hair is towards the equator, like Africa, South India, and South Asia. And you could also find it in South America. But a lot of South Americans are actually not natives to the land. They are descendants of Europeans, mainly Spanish, Italian, and a little bit of German. And you can find more hairy people towards the south of South America, like Argentina. Moving on, if you look at this map, you see the Native Americans in Latin America. The deeper the purple, the more there are. The most amount of Native Americans in a country is Bolivia, which 55% of the population are natives. These are the people that basically domesticated potatoes, which we've made a video on. This shows us that more than 90% of Latin America and North America is in immigrant hands, and you don't really find them in Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina, and of course, Northern Latin America. And most of them have less than 5% of the population. And this is in a way where only natives used to live here 500 years ago. But you also have to know that a lot of these people are African Americans that were brought here for slavery, where you can find most of them in the US and Brazil. This is the highest cause of death in Europe. The purple ones are different types of cancer, and red is cardiovascular disease and heart attacks. It's funny because the heart attack maps is basically the USSR. Maybe in the USSR they drank too much or had a lot of stress, because a lot of them have cardiovascular problems when they get older. You've probably heard different types of national anthem, and they always have a singer. But in the entire world, there are only 4 countries that don't have a singer for their national anthem, and these are the countries in red: Spain, Bosnia, San Marino, and Kosovo. But Kosovo is not recognized as a country by most countries in the world, so it's not a country yet. These different colored countries you're seeing has 3 or more official languages, and Bolivia has the most official languages with 37. It's crazy that there are 37 languages in Bolivia, and if you don't know it, you pretty much cannot communicate with one another. But there's always a main language that everybody knows so you can communicate, which is Spanish over here. If you pay attention, most of the countries that have a lot of official languages are not very good countries or advanced whatsoever, except Switzerland, but that's a country that's divided by 4 countries around it, so it has the 4 languages that used to be there. This map you're seeing is every country's top tourist attraction. If it's colored green, it has a lot of historical attractions. If it's pink, it's natural. If it's gray, it's a religious attraction. And if it's purple, it's a touristy country and there's a whole lot of different things to do. Like for example, the coolest ones you see is green, like Iran is Persepolis, or India is Taj Mahal. China is known for the Great Wall of China, and if you'd like to read most of it, you can go full screen and read all of them. The red-colored countries you're seeing were once a Titanic passenger in the year 1912. It's interesting because there's a map of mosquitoes around the world, and the only country that does not have mosquitoes is Iceland. Even Greenland has mosquitoes. The picture you're seeing is the map of aircrafts passing through the Middle East. And as you can see, the places that there are wars like Syria and Iraq, barely any aircrafts pass. You guys already know the longest country in the world, which is Chile. Not long in terms of actually length, because that belongs to Russia. But in terms of up and down, Chile gets the cake. But if you put this map on Europe, north of it will be on Norway, and the southern part will go all the way down to southern Spain. This is the Allies bombing the Axis powers in World War II. The blue ones are Great Britain, and the red ones are the US. At first, the British are bombing the Germans. After a while, when the US joins the war, they help Britain in Europe, but they're mostly focusing on Japan. But pay attention to Japan at the end of the war and the whole country turning red. This is the European map 500 years ago. And the most interesting part is modern day Germany, basically the Holy Roman Empire, where there's so many different whatever countries. There is a reason that the German people love Otto von Bismarck and see him as a hero, because he was the first one to unify all these states. We've all heard of Luxembourg, but a lot of people don't know how tiny it is right over here. But we want to compare this tiny country to other tiny countries, which is ginormous next to them. Singapore, Monaco, San Marino, Malta, Andorra, Liechtenstein, and the Vatican. So compared to Luxembourg, they are very tiny. The left picture is the Jewish population in Europe 1933, and most of the population are in Poland and Russia. But the next map shows us the Jewish population in 2015, and the only country that rose in population is France. The unluckiest geography belongs to Poland, and every power that wanted to take over Europe, they first began taking over Poland. On this map, every country in red has decided to conquer Poland one time in their history. The most interesting part about this map is that Great Britain is not turned red. This is the population density map for North America. When you look at the US, you see most of them are in the eastern part of the country, and that's because of the Mississippi River that keeps this part of the country alive. When you go towards west, there is less and less life because of the way the life is, until you get to the complete west coast of California, Washington, and Oregon, and the population lifts back up. When you look at the Canadian population density, they're mostly next to the Great Lakes, by the border of the US. And this is the Mexican population density. These two maps is for Africa and which country they import from. The left side is for the year 2000, which most of the countries they imported from was from France. And the right one is 2020, and the number one importer is China. This is the map of the world that has the most amount of islands. A lot of people think that Indonesia is in first place, but they're actually not even close. They are in 6th place. The top 3 goes to the Scandinavian countries. Of course, Sweden has a lot of islands, 267,000 and counting, but they're not giant islands. Maybe it's like a giant piece of rock counted as an island. Then you have Norway, Finland, Canada, US, and then finally you get to Indonesia. This is the map of billionaires around the world. Like for example, Russia has 83 billionaires. Then you have China at 607 billionaires. And the US has the most at 735. And you could clearly see the rest of them. This is the map where it's illegal to spank your children and hit them. If the country is in red, you cannot do that and it's considered illegal. As you know, the Chinese have different wording and letters for countries, and their literal definition of a country is very interesting for you to know. Like for example, Italy is called Big Prophet, or England is called Brave Land. They call France Lawland. In old countries, they have their own names. Like Russia is called Russia, or Iran is called Persia. They call Germany Moral Land. The map you're seeing and the ways you're seeing is the routes of Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta was a Moroccan explorer that went all over the modern world, and he held a record for the longest exploration before the invention of the steam engine. The reason it has different colors is because it's throughout his life, and he wouldn't go at one time. He would return and then go once again. Red was the first trip, then it's green, then purple, and the last one is the orange one. It took him almost 30 years to visit all these places and basically see all the important places in the world. And he traveled more than 120,000 kilometers. And this is when there's no cars or anything. He traveled with camels and horses. If you look at its route in Europe, he visited Eastern Europe, but he didn't go to Rome, one of the most important cities in Europe. And this was the reason that Rome was controlled by Christians, mainly the Pope, and they didn't allow not Christian people around there. And of course, Ibn Battuta was a Muslim. Japan has a lot of people living in there, and Tokyo is one of the most populated cities in the world, especially during the day, because a lot of Japanese travel there for work. During the day, Tokyo has more than 37 million people in there. And when you compare it to the world population of different countries, Japan has more people than these countries in red. The green countries you're seeing, more than 50% of their land is forest. And of course, Brazil is the most important one. In the northern part, you have Sweden and Finland. Most of the Amazon is in Brazil, but the most forested country in the whole world is above Brazil, called Suriname. 90% of this country is forest, and you can see the rest of them on the map. This map shows us the terms for syphilis in the 1500s. It's interesting because everybody had a different name for it. The blue countries call it the French disease. The red countries like Portugal called it Spanish disease. The purple countries like France called it the Italian disease. And when you move towards the Middle East, the yellow countries call it the Western European or Christian disease. And the Persians also called it Persian fire or the Western European Christian disease. And when you go all the way to the eastern part of the world, they called it the Chinese rash. And the Japanese also called it the Portuguese disease as well. In 1989, certain countries boarded Poland that no longer exist. The USSR, Czechoslovakia, and East Germany. And this is the map today. The left map you're seeing is in the year 2008, and the right one is 2020. But what the hell are these lines? These are high-speed rails throughout eastern part of China, and they're all high-speed railing. What you're seeing is the nuclear power map of the world. Dark blue have operating reactors, and they are building new reactors. Light blue have operating reactors and are planning to build new ones. Then you have the green ones that have no reactors, but they want to build reactors. The only red country you're seeing is Germany, and they basically had operating reactors, but they decided to phase out and no longer have nuclear reactors, which is a terrible mistake. And the black countries you're seeing, like Italy, civil nuclear power is illegal. This is the map for the second languages people want to learn in each country. Of course, most of the world is green, and that means they want to learn English. But that's not the only one. The blue countries want to learn French. Yellow countries like the US want to learn Spanish. And then you have a little bit of purple countries, and they want to learn German, like Afghanistan. This is the hair color of the world. As you see, most of the world has black and brown hair, but when you go north and south, you see more blonde and red hair. This is the circumcision map of the world, and the more red a place is, the more circumcision there is, and the more green, the less. For Western countries, the United States has a lot of circumcision going on, and more than 70% of the boys there get circumcised. In the end, let's look at the addiction map of the world. The US and Libya have a lot of addicts, and that's the highest percentage per capita. But when you look at the Middle East, like Iran, Iraq, Syria, Saudi, and Turkey, they have a lot of addicts as well, and that means the Middle East, there's a lot of addiction going on. Let's look at the world map. Some people say that this map is not real, and the sizes do not match the real thing. This is the map you see everywhere, and it's actually taught in school as well. But we have to know that this map is completely wrong. Not like this is a conspiracy, this is actually real. We all know that Earth is a sphere. It's only a few people that don't believe that, and they say it's flat. But the map we see is flat, and it's not a globe, and that is why the sizes cannot be real. To see the real size of our world, we have to go to this website, thetruesize.com. When you go on this website, you could see the actual sizes of each country. The sizes of the countries by the equator are all exact, but when you step away from the equator and go towards the North or South Pole, it gets bigger and more stretched out, and it's not the real thing. Let's use Iran as an example. It's above the equator. Just like we said, the more you go north, the bigger the map is gonna get. Let's go up and see what happens. Can you even believe it? Look how giant that yellow one got. And we took Iran 2 steps down to the equator, and this is the smallest one you see. But let's go to the biggest country that's located on the equator. Brazil. Brazil is a giant country, 8.5 million kilometers squared. And Canada is 9,900,000 kilometers squared. But when you look at Canada compared to Brazil, it looks way bigger. And it's because it's way north. Let's take Brazil and go to Canada and see what happens. It's not much smaller. But now let's take Canada and go down to Brazil. The sizes are correct, but on the map that's flat, it's shown like this. It shows Russia as half the world, but when you bring it in the middle, it shows the true color. Everybody knows India. An insane amount of people live there, and it's gonna pass China, but the country doesn't look that big. Let's take India to Europe and see the true size. When you take India to Europe, it pretty much covers almost all of it. But when you look at it down here, it doesn't seem that big. Indonesia is exactly on the equator. This country is created with thousands of different islands, and nobody still knows how many islands creates this country because they really can't count it. But since this country is on the equator, it's shown very small on the map. Let's take Indonesia to the US and see what size it is. It sticks out of the United States. The United States is about 5,000 kilometers long, so Indonesia is way longer than 5,000 kilometers. But when you see it on a regular map, it doesn't seem that big. If you flip Chile on its side, it's pretty much as long as the United States. There's another place that's giant, but it doesn't show, and that's Africa. Africa is so big that you can fit the entire United States in there, except Alaska. We could fit China right here. Let's put India at the bottom, West Europe, and we'll put UK on Madagascar. And there's still a lot of free space left. So Africa is ginormous, but it doesn't show. You guys know the biggest country in the world, Russia. The map shows it like it's half the world. Let's take Russia to Africa and see what happens. You guys know the Congo. It's one of the biggest countries in Africa. If you guys seen our video about Leopold II, you guys know that Belgium took over the Congo. Let's take the Belgium map over Congo and see what happens. This is Belgium. It's kind of like a city inside the Congo. But this tiny little thing, 100 years ago, took over the entire Congo, and it turned all its people into slaves. And if you watch our video, you'll get to know him a little bit better. Why aren't we talking about Greenland? It's like an elephant sitting up there. It's a giant piece of land, but it's kind of a show off. Let's take it down and let's see its true size. When you look at Greenland compared to Australia, it's like twice the size. But let's take it next to Australia and see its true size. Why did it get so small? This is Greenland in South America. Let's compare Greenland to Iran. When you look at these two, you could fit 7 or 8 Irans inside Greenland. But this is the true scale. When you put Iran and Afghanistan together, they're the same size as Greenland. As you know, Iran is 1,648,000 kilometers squared, and Afghanistan is 652,000 kilometers squared. When you put these two together, it's exactly 2.3 million kilometers squared, and Greenland's size is 2,166,000 kilometers squared. So you could say Greenland is a good actor because it shows itself a lot bigger than it is. But there's another place on planet Earth and everybody seems to forget about it. Some people think it's ginormous, some people think it's very small. That's Antarctica. If we put Antarctica in North America, it goes from the north of Mexico all the way to the northern part of Canada. There's a lot of cool examples you could do with this website, so go to truesize.com and check it out for yourself. But still, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about this subject, but the real deal can be found on this website. Or you can go buy a globe and see the true world size for yourself. But messing around on this website is a lot of fun.